Okay, now let's talk about if else conditions. Now this is very fun because you can chain these conditions one after another and define multiple conditions and do different things based on different conditions. Let's see an example. So we'll start with a simple if block. So if 4 is less than 2, then we will log to the console 4 is smaller than 2. Now else if 3 is greater than 1, so we're typing in else and then another if conditional, and the condition is 3 is greater than 1. And if that's true, then we'll log to the console 3 is bigger than 1. And then finally we'll define the else block, which will execute console.log neither is true. And then we'll end the else block. So how does this work? So in this case, we're defining two different conditions and finally an else block to do something if neither of them are true. So the code starts executing from top to bottom. So at first, JavaScript encounters the if statement, and then it executes the conditional. 4 is less than 2. And as we all know, 4 is not less than 2. 4 is greater than 2. That's why this condition returns false. And thus the code inside the if block is not executed. So JavaScript moves on to the else if block. So else if 3 is greater than 1, which is indeed true, which means the code inside the else if block will be executed. So the second bit of code will be executed. That's why console.log 3 is bigger than 1 is what is actually executed, and this is the string that will be logged to the console. And finally we have the else block, which again is not executed because the second condition returned true. Only if the first and the second condition would return false, then we would fall back to the else block. And that's how the if else conditions work. Now do note that in JavaScript, the else if is not actually anything different. It's actually an else block chained together with another if block. So you're essentially typing in else and then you're chaining in another if and else block along with it. And you can chain these as many times as you want to define multiple conditions and do different things based on different conditions. And finally an else block to execute if none of them are true. And that's how you can use if else conditions to define multiple conditions and add more dynamic logic and behavior to your code. So let's see another example. In this case, we'll define a variable n, which equals to 32. And now we'll define the if block, and the condition is n is greater than 50. So if n is greater than 50, then we will log to the console n is bigger than 50. Else if n is less than 50, then we will log to the console n is smaller than 50. And if neither of them are true, else we will log none to the console. And then we end the conditional. So how does this work? Now if you execute this code, you'll see that the code inside the second block, which is n is smaller than 50, that's what's actually executed and logged to the console. So how does this work? Well, first we have a variable n, which equals to the value 32. Then we define the if conditional. And now the if condition is n is greater than 50. And this will return false because n is 32 and 32 is not greater than 50. 32 is smaller than 50. So n is greater than 50 would return false and the code inside the if block will not run. Then we will move on to the else if block. In the else if block, n is less than 50 is the condition, and this will return true because n is 32 and 32 is less than 50. So n is less than 50 returns true, which means the code inside this block will be executed, and that's why we get logged to the console n is smaller than 50. Then we have the else block, which again is not executed because we have the second condition return true, and that's why the else block is skipped. And that's how you can use else if to chain multiple conditions together. So you can almost read this code intuitively as if n is greater than 50, then log to the console n is bigger than 50. Else if n is smaller than 50, then log to the console n is smaller than 50. Else, just log to the console none. And that's how this code would read out in human form. In this case, we'll make it a bit different. So first, we'll have $10 discount applied if the order value is at least 50. This is what we had previously, but we'll define another condition in this case. In this case, we'll have a second condition, which is a $20 discount will be applied if the order value is at least 100. So if the order value is 100 or more, then a $20 discount will be applied, and if it's 50 or more, then a $10 discount will be applied. Otherwise, no discounts will be applied. So how will this work, and how will we translate this into JavaScript code? Let's see. So first, again, we'll have the variable order total, which equals the total order value. In this case, it's 199. So that is the total value of the order in this case. Then we'll start defining our conditions. So first, we'll start with if order total is greater than or equal to 100. So we're starting with 100 because that's the biggest. So in this case, order total must be equal to or greater than 100. And if that's true, then we will minus $20 from the order total variable. Else if order total is equal to $50 or more, then we will minus $10 from the order total. And finally, if none of them is true, then we'll log to the console no discounts. And then we end the statement. And now if we check the order total variable, the value is 179. So how does this work? Let's start from the top. So first we define the order total variable with the value 199. That's the value of the order total variable. Then JavaScript executes the if block. And in the if block we have the condition order total is greater than or equal to 100. Now in this case the order total is 199 and 199 is definitely greater than 100. So this condition is true. And that's why order total minus equals 20 is executed. And that's how we get the $20 discount for this order. So 199 minus 20 is 179. And that is what the value of order total is after this code is executed. Now the else if block doesn't need to run because the if block already returned true and that code is executed. So the else if block and the else block is skipped. Otherwise we would get an extra $10 discount, which shouldn't be the case. So the else if and the else blocks are skipped and only the if block is executed. That's why we get a $20 discount. And that's why the order total is currently 179. So a $20 discount has been applied. So because the order total was at least 100, we got a $20 discount. But if the order total value was at least $50, so for example $50 or anything between 50 and 100, then we would get a $10 discount. Otherwise, if it was less than $50, then we would just get a message log to the console that says no discounts. And that's how you can use if, else blocks for dynamic logic and conditions like this. Okay, so now let's improve our discount marketing campaign even further. So again, in this case, we'll have a discount if the order value exceeds a certain amount, but the discount will be more if the customer actually has an account with our store, and if it doesn't, the discount will be less. So in this case, we need to define two variables. Variable order total, which will contain the total value of the order, in this case is $117, and then we'll define another variable has account, which will contain a boolean, either true or false. So in this case, we have two variables, order total, which contains the total value of the order in numbers, and then another variable has account, which is either true or false, depending on whether the customer actually has an account or not. But again, in a real-life application, you would most likely be getting these values either from the server or from another application or script on the page. But in this case, we don't want to complicate things, so we'll just hard-code the different values in these variables. So we have a variable order total, which equals 117, and has account true, which means the customer indeed has the account. And now the marketing campaign. The marketing campaign will be that if the order value is at least 100 and the customer actually has an account, then we'll give a $20 discount. Otherwise, if the order value is at least 100, but if the customer does not have an account, then we'll only give $10 discount. Otherwise, no discounts will be applied. So how do we code this in JavaScript? Well, we'll start with the if block. So in this case, if order total is greater than or equal to 100 and has account, then we'll do something. What we'll do? We will minus $20 from the order total variable. Else, if order total is greater than or equal to 100 and does not have an account, then we only minus $10 from the order total variable. Else, if neither is true, then we just log to the console no discounts available. And then we end the statement. And now the order total variable contains the value 97. So how does this work? Well, first we have two variables, order total, which equals 117, and has account, which equals true. Inside the if condition, we have two different conditions binded together using the logical AND operator. So which means both of these conditions must return true in order for the whole condition to return true. Otherwise, if one of them returns false, the whole condition will be false. So the first condition is order total is greater than or equal to 100. In this case, it is true. Order total is equals 117, which is greater than 100. So the first condition returns true. And now we have the second condition. The second condition is has account. Now here's the cool thing. We actually don't need to say has account is strictly equal to true, because the has account is strictly equal to true is the same as has account. Because has account is a boolean, we can just define that, because if it's a boolean true, then it will be true. If it's false, then it will be false. So we don't need to define an actual condition in this case. We just need to type in the variable name, and that will be enough. So in this case, order total is greater than or equal to 100, which is true, and the second condition is has account, which equals to true. And because both of these conditions return true, the whole condition returns true because it's binded together with logical AND. And then the code inside the if block gets executed, and $20 has been minused from the order. So 117 minus 20 is 97, and that is the final value of the order total variable, and all the other code is skipped. But what if the has account variable would contain false, which means the customer does not have an account? What would happen then? Well, then the first if condition would return false, because had account would be false and the whole AND condition would be false. That's why the code won't be executed and JavaScript would move to the else if condition. And then again inside the else if condition would have order total greater than or equal to 100, which would be true, and then and not has account. So if has account was false, then the logical NOT would actually reverse this boolean value into true. So not has account would be true then, and then the whole condition would be true, and then $10 would be minus from the order. So if has account is true, then the first condition gets executed. If has account is false, then the second condition is executed. And otherwise, they will get logged to the console, no discounts available. And that's how this whole code will work. So just to recap, if the order total is equal to or more than 100, only then any discounts will be applied. Otherwise, we would skip to the else block and it will be logged no discounts available. Now, if the order value is equal to or more than 100, then we'll have to check for the has account. If the has account is true, then the first if block gets executed and we get $20 discount on our order. If has account is false, then the second bit of code gets executed and we get only $10 discount on our order. And otherwise, we get logged to the console, no discounts available. And that's how this code will work.